Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at Taxi Driver, the 1976 masterpiece, I guess you would call it,
Right.
by Martin Scorsese,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to be using the review from Roger Ebert, kind of as our roadmap.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So the film follows the story of Travis Bickle. He's a Vietnam War vet who ends up in. Well, he's driving a cab in 1970s New York City.
Yeah.
And the whole film is about him really struggling with loneliness.
Right.
And ultimately, he tries to find connection in some pretty disturbing ways.
Um,
And Ebert argues that what makes this film so powerful even decades later is that it taps into this universal feeling of loneliness,
yeah.
which is something that I think we've probably all felt at some
For
point.
sure.
Yeah. Get ready to explore the dark and complex world of Travis Bickle and see what uncomfortable truths this film might reveal about ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
About all of us.
Taxi Driver
Mm-hmm.
is so interesting because of how it presents Travis Bickle. He's clearly a troubled individual, but there's just something about his struggles that makes him a relatable anti-hero.
Yeah, right. And Ebert points out that a lot of the film focuses on Travis's failed attempts to connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he takes Betsy on that disastrous date to the porno theater,
Right.
and then he just can't seem to hold a normal conversation with anyone. And
No.
there's that really chilling scene where he's talking to his reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that visual with him asking, "You talking to me?"
Right.
Really, I
Yeah.
think, drives home his isolation.
It's a really effective way to show how isolated he is. And I think Scorsese is using those moments to visually represent Travis's inner turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that slow motion he uses
Right.
to highlight how Travis,
Yeah.
sees the world around him.
Yeah. It's amazing how Scorsese uses these cinematic techniques to get us inside Travis's head. But what's really fascinating is that despite all of Travis's unsettling behavior and his descent into violence, we still find ourselves connecting with him on some level. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because his longing for connection, even if it's expressed
Yeah.
unhealthy ways, it reflects a very human need.
Right.
You know, we may not condone his actions,
Mm-hmm.
but we can see how his actions come from this very deep-seated need to connect with others, to be understood.
Right, to not be alone.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if maybe we see a bit of ourselves in Travis, you know, in that yearning for connection, even if we'd never go to the extremes that he does.
Mm-hmm.
Ebert makes this, I think, really interesting comparison between Taxi Driver and John Ford's classic Western, The Searchers.
Right.
He argues that both films center on these alienated men who become fixated on rescuing women who might not want or need saving.
Right. And it's such an interesting comparison. In The Searchers, you have John Wayne's character, Ethan Edwards. He's a Civil War veteran, and he dedicates years to searching for his niece who was kidnapped by Comanches. He's so obsessed with rescuing her.
Yeah.
Even though she may no longer identify with her white family, he sees them as the enemy.
And in Taxi Driver, Travis becomes fixated on saving Iris. She's a young prostitute from her pimp, Sport.
Right.
And it's interesting, Ebert notes that Sport even wears an Indian headband, which kind of visually links him to the enemy figure in The Searcher.
Yeah. It's really interesting how both films feature these men who believe they're doing the right thing, but their motivations are clouded by their own prejudices and desires.
Yeah.
And it really raises some big questions about masculinity, power dynamics, and the whole idea of the savior complex,
Right.
which can lead to some pretty
Yeah.
destructive behavior.
Yeah. It's true. Both Ethan and Travis take it upon themselves to become these rescuers, but their actions are ultimately driven by their own kind of skewed perceptions of the world and the women they're trying to save.
Right.
This theme really makes you question who gets to decide who needs saving and what true heroism actually looks like.
Exactly.
You know?
The films invite us to consider the complexities of good intentions gone wrong
Yeah.
and how the desire to do good can be twisted into something harmful.
Yeah. And both films grapple with this idea of redemption, but they do so in very different ways.
Yeah. In The Searchers, there's a glimmer of hope when Ethan chooses to spare his niece's life, even after she's been living with the Comanches. But the film ends with him alone, separated from the family he tried so hard to protect.
Right. While in Taxi Driver, we're left with this much more ambiguous ending.
Right.
You know, is Travis actually hailed as a hero, or is it all in his head? Does he even survive the final shootout?
It's a question that's been debated for years, and there's no easy answer. But as Ebert points out, The ending isn't really about literal truth. It functions more like music, offering emotional closure, rather than this, clear-cut resolution. And we're left feeling like Travis might have found some kind of peace,
Yeah.
but it came at a terrible cost.
Right. It's this really unsettling kind of piece. I mean,
Yeah.
he pretty much just goes on this rampage.
Right.
And that ambiguity is part of what makes the film so powerful, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the darkness of Travis's actions, but also leaves us wondering about his internal state and whether he finds any kind of redemption.
It's interesting that Ebert also compares Taxi Driver to Scorsese's earlier film, Mean Streets.
Right.
Both films feature characters grappling with guilt, redemption,
Yeah.
and their place in a society. That feels hostile and unforgiving. Yeah. And Scorsese uses these powerful techniques to draw us into their inner worlds. The slow-motion sequences, the close-ups, on these seemingly insignificant details, it's like we're experiencing the world through their eyes, feeling their anxieties and frustrations.
Yeah.
Like, think about that diner scene where Travis is fixated on this black man. He suspects it's a pimp.
Right.
Those close-ups really highlight his prejudices
Yeah.
and that skewed worldview he's developed.
It's almost like we as the audience are put in a position to judge, but also to understand how Travis arrived at that point.
Yeah.
Speaking of context, it's impossible to ignore the historical backdrop of the film.
Right.
Taxi Driver was released in 1976, just a few years after the Vietnam War, and the Watergate scandal.
Yeah.
American cities were struggling with crime and poverty, and there was this pervasive sense of disillusionment.
Exactly. The country was deeply divided, uncertain about its future. And in a way,
Yeah.
Travis becomes a symbol of that societal angst, that feeling that the American dream has turned into a nightmare. He's lost faith in the system and is searching for something to believe in, even if it leads him down a dark and violent path.
So you could say that while the film is set in this specific time and place, it also speaks to these larger timeless themes of alienation, disillusionment, and the search for meaning.
Right. And what's so remarkable about Taxi Driver
Yeah.
is that it manages to find a strange beauty within all that darkness and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the way Scorsese captures the neon-lit streets of New York City at night, the gritty realism punctuated by moments of almost operatic grandeur.
Yeah.
It's like he's finding poetry in the underbelly of society.
Which is kind of like Travis himself, wouldn't you say? He's deeply disturbed, but he's also capable of moments of vulnerability, of yearning for something better.
That's the paradox of Travis Bickle. He's both repellent and strangely sympathetic. We're repulsed by his violence. But we also get glimpses of his humanity, that yearning for connection, that leads him down such a self-destructive path. And Scorsese doesn't shy away from that complexity. He doesn't offer us easy answers or simple judgments.
Right, and that complexity is what makes Taxi Driver such a challenging and rewarding film. It's not passive entertainment. It forces you to think, to feel, and to grapple with these uncomfortable truths about human nature.
Yeah.
And Ebert's review serves as a fantastic guide through this complex landscape, prompting us to ask difficult questions and to see the film through different lenses.
It's like having a film expert sitting next to you, offering insights
Yeah.
and helping you unlock the deeper meanings of what you're seeing on screen.
Right.
And it reminds us that film criticism, at its best, is about engaging in a dialogue with the film, with the filmmaker, and ultimately with ourselves.
It's about using film as a mirror to reflect on our own lives, our own values, and our own understanding of the world, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And in the case of Taxi Driver, that mirror can be both illuminating
Yeah.
and deeply unsettling. It forces us to confront the darkness within ourselves, that potential for violence that exists, in even the most seemingly ordinary individuals.
Yeah. But at the same time, it reminds us that even in the midst of all that darkness, there's always the possibility of redemption, however imperfect or ambiguous it may be.
Yeah, that's a message that continues to resonate with audiences today, just as powerfully as it did back in 1976 when the film was released. It speaks to our enduring fascination, the dark side of human nature, and our desire to understand the forces that drive people to extreme actions.
Now, going back to Scorsese's brilliant filmmaking, one thing that really stood out to me was his use of slow motion, especially in those point-of-view shots. From Travis's perspective,
Yeah.
it creates such a palpable sense of tension and unease.
It's incredibly effective. by slowing down time.
Yeah.
Scorsese forces us to see the world as Travis sees it, heightened, hyper-aware, almost like he's constantly on edge, ready to strike. It's as if the city itself becomes a hunting ground for him, and his taxi is his weapon.
Yeah, and then you have those overhead shots, almost as if we're looking down from above, like a god surveying his creation. I remember Ebert mentioning that. Scorsese uses these shots to evoke a kind of priestly perspective, adding another layer of meaning to Travis's actions.
It's a brilliant touch, isn't it? It ties back into that rescuer archetype we talked about earlier. Travis sees himself as this righteous figure, cleansing the city of its sin, almost like he's carrying out some divine mission.
And that ambiguity at the end. Whether Travis's heroism is real or imagined just adds to the film's unsettling power. It leaves us questioning our own perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong.
That's exactly what makes Taxi Driver such a powerful and enduring film. It refuses to offer easy answers or neat resolutions. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us.
It's not a film you simply watch and forget. It stays with you, provoking you to think long after the credits have rolled. And Ebert's review, with its insightful observations and thought-provoking questions, serves as an invaluable companion on that journey.
Absolutely. It encourages us to delve deeper, to look beyond the surface, and to engage with the film on a more meaningful level.
Speaking of looking deeper, one thing that struck me was how Scorsese uses those close-up shots in the diner scene to reveal Travis's prejudices and his skewed perception of reality. It's such a subtle but powerful way to convey his inner turmoil.
Yeah, it's brilliant how Scorsese uses those visual cues to give us a glimpse into Travis's psyche. It's like we're seeing the world through his eyes, experiencing his anxieties and his distorted view of reality.
And those overhead shots, with that almost godlike perspective, add another layer of complexity. They suggest that Travis sees himself as a kind of avenging angel, carrying out some sort of divine mission.
Right, which of course ties back to the whole rescuer archetype we discussed earlier. He's so alienated from society that he takes it upon himself to become judge, jury, and executioner.
And that ambiguity at the end. Whether Travis is truly hailed as a hero, or if it's all in his head, is just another example of how Scorsese challenges us to think critically and draw our own conclusions.
Exactly. It's not about providing easy answers, but about provoking a conversation, sparking a dialogue that extends far beyond the confines of the film itself.
Speaking of sparking dialogue, one thing I found fascinating was Ebert's comparison of Taxi Driver to Scorsese's earlier film, Mean Streets. Both films delve into these themes of guilt, redemption, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unforgiving.
Right.
And both films employ these innovative techniques to pull us into the characters' inner lives, making us feel their anxieties and frustrations.
That's right. And both films reflect Scorsese's fascination with the dark underbelly of society and his ability to find a strange beauty in even the most unsettling subject matter.
And it's that combination of darkness and beauty, violence and vulnerability, that makes Taxi Driver such a complex and compelling film. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us, but it also leaves us with a sense of hope, however fleeting or ambiguous it may be.
And Ebert's review, with its insightful observations and thought-provoking questions, serves as an invaluable guide on that journey of exploration and self-discovery.
Absolutely. It reminds us that film criticism, at its best, is about more than just assigning stars, or thumbs up or thumbs down.
Right.
It's about engaging in a meaningful dialogue with the film, with the filmmaker, and ultimately with ourselves.
It's about using film as a mirror to reflect on our own lives, our own values, and our own understanding of the world. And in the case of Taxi Driver, that mirror can be both illuminating and profoundly unsettling. But ultimately, it's a reflection that can help us to better understand ourselves and the complexities of the human condition.
It's a film that stays with you long after the credits have rolled, you know? And I think that's a testament to Scorsese's brilliance as a filmmaker. He doesn't shy away from the darkness, but he also manages to elicit the sense of empathy for this deeply troubled character. We may not condone Travis's actions, but we can understand the pain and isolation that drive him to such extremes.
Yeah. And that's what makes Taxi Driver such a powerful and thought-provoking film. It doesn't offer easy answers or simple judgments. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society we live in. It's a film that invites multiple interpretations and stays with you long after you've seen it, prompting you to reflect on your own experiences and your understanding of the world.
And Ebert's review really helped guide us through those complex themes and layers of meaning. It's like having a film scholar sitting beside you, whispering insights and helping you to see the film with fresh eyes.
I think that's the beauty of film criticism at its best. It's not about dictating interpretations, but about encouraging a dialogue, sparking a conversation. That can extend far beyond the screen. It's about using film as a tool for reflection, for exploring the human condition, and for grappling with the big questions that shape our lives.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Taxi Driver, guided by the insightful words of Roger Ebert. We hope this exploration has given you a new appreciation for this cinematic masterpiece and for the enduring power of film to challenge, provoke, and inspire.
And as you revisit Taxi Driver or explore other works by Martin Scorsese, keep in mind the themes we've discussed today. Look for those visual cues, the subtle details, and the ways in which Scorsese uses cinematic techniques to create a world that is both beautiful and unsettling. Most importantly, allow yourself to engage with the film on your own terms, to draw your own conclusions, and to let the experience resonate with your own understanding of the world.
So as always, we leave you with a final, thought-provoking question to ponder. Does the film ultimately condemn Travis Bickle's descent into violence? Or does it offer, perhaps unintentionally, a glimmer of understanding and even empathy for his tortured soul? We encourage you to revisit the film, to explore other Scorsese works, and to continue this conversation with your own insights and perspectives. Until next time, keep diving deep.